Hey, welcome back to another episode of A Warrior Spirit, where we let the inner warrior shine out in their light. Today, I have the pleasure of Amber Fuhriman. Amber is unique in the fact that she's a full-time lawyer, does a podcast, is about to be a published author, and she's a trained NLP coach and transitioning from law to coaching. So, Amber, it's just such a great blessing to have you here today. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, I love the fact that you are transitioning out of law into full-time coaching. That tells me that you have a giver's heart on two levels, because you're a criminal defense attorney, an immigration attorney, and now going into full-time coaching. So that's awesome. You grew up in a family of how many?
Five. So
Five.
3 kids and mom and dad.
Okay. And you had a pretty normal childhood growing up, but you did start to experience some loss at a young age. You said early on before we started that around 7, you started to experience some of your first loss.
Yeah, my cousin, who I was super, super close to, committed suicide at the age of 7. When I was 7, he was 16 or 17. And that was super impactful for me, which most of my family members, especially when I'm talking to my mom about this, she's shocked at how much I remember. And I think that that's super important that we realize that when we're growing up, we remember so much more than we think we do. And our kids remember so much more than we think they do. So that was my first experience with loss. And I don't think that I really understood at the time what it meant, but coming from a super, super, super close-knit family, it was inevitable that people were going to pass away.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just felt like I was going to funeral after funeral after funeral, 2 suicides, multiple deaths through natural causes. And then my dad was killed in a work-related accident when I was 18. And it just seemed like everybody disappeared from my life. And I didn't realize the effect that was going to have on me as an adult.
So I'm a student of psychology, so I'm going to throw my 2-cent, pop psychology in there occasionally. You began to associate love and loss as equal.
Yeah. I finally, so much of my story is my meltdown that I had in 2016. And I say that only to say my dad passed away in 2001. And it was 2016 when I was at my lowest point that I finally opened up and talked to somebody about it. For 15 years, I refused to go to therapy. I refused to talk to anybody. And when I finally opened up, my therapist unofficially diagnosed me with abandonment issues. And that made complete sense to me.
So in those 15 plus years, plus your 18 of all that loss, so you're talking 32 years of feeling this way. At your lowest, did you, even though you'd experienced the devastation of suicide, did you contemplate it?
Not once.
Perfect.
It's interesting because I never contemplated suicide in any way, shape, or form. But there's a different feeling that I think that so many people can relate to, and that's the bullshit. Can I swear on this podcast?
You sure fucking can.
Okay, thank you. I should have asked you before. It's the podcasts that I can't are really hard for me. It's the bullshit that we tell ourselves that if we weren't here, nobody would care. And I think that indifference is different than saying, I don't want to be here, right? So there was never a moment that I thought suicide was an option. There was never a moment that I thought I was going to go down that road. But there were multiple moments where I would push people away, and I would justify that by saying that it didn't matter to them whether I was there or in their life or not.
Do you sort of feel invisible at that point? Like, who cares? Whatever.
Invisible is a good way to put it. it's crazy how we can feel invisible, but also believe everybody's judging us at the same point in time,
Oh,
because
yeah.
those two things don't go hand in hand, right? They either see us or they don't. And if they don't see us, then they can't judge us. Yet our brain is so amazing at magnifying all of the worst things that we think about ourselves. And that period of my life, you know, when I think back, I had a pretty healthy relationship with loss for the first, it was probably my uncle when he committed suicide when I was, God, it was 2000 or it was 96, so I was 14. It's probably where I started to break down a little bit. And then, you know, I used to write, I played music, I sang at so many different functions in honor of these people that I had lost. And I held on to all of that. But when my dad passed away, I pushed it all away. I quit playing the piano. The last thing, until my book that I just finished, the last thing that I ever wrote is written on my dad's headstone. And I feel like all of those healthy coping mechanisms that I had for this loss, like they just all stair-stepped. And when I lost my dad, it just crushed me.
May I ask what the epitaph was?
For my dad?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, I have to pull it up. It was a poem that I wrote for him the day he died. I wrote it the day he died, and then I never wrote again.
And that poem is on his
It's
tombstone?
printed on the back of his headstone.
Wow, that's pretty impactful and powerful. When I say invisible, you know, it's people, we see them, okay, they see me enough to judge me, but they don't see the true who I
Yeah.
am me. So we run this veil of like, well, everyone's judging me, but nobody sees me. Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that sometimes we wonder whether we see us, right?
Right.
Sometimes we question whether there's anything worth being seen, which is the other side of all the bullshit, right? I used to have conversations with people where on this line I would talk about, like, I now know what I bring to the table. I now know what I bring to the table. And somebody called me on that and they said, Amber, you don't have to bring anything to the table. Like, your presence is enough with or without you bringing anything to the table. And so I think, especially in an entrepreneurial world where we're constantly talking about how we can provide value to others, we associate our self-worth with the value that we can provide. And if we don't feel like we can bring anything to the table, then we don't feel like we're welcome or deserve to be there. And when we get that person that calls us out on that, steps back and says, you impact a room regardless of any other value, your presence is necessary, that's an important conversation to have.
So yeah, absolutely. I think it's we often we want to seat ourselves at the table, but then as much as we don't want to be judged, we also judge everyone else at the table, and we try to measure up our own self-worth. Am I as good as the person to my left or my right? And so we start judging them and creating our self-worth on them as well. So when you can learn to just sit at the fucking table, right?
Yeah. Yeah. In NLP, we have a concept known as perception as projection, right? And the idea is that everybody in our life are just mirrors for us to project the things that we dislike the most about ourselves onto, so that we can learn from that. But we also project the things that we like about ourselves, right? So if I look at you and say, you know, this is a great podcast, you're a great host, you're an amazing person, and I'm glad to know you, I can't see those things in you if I don't know what they feel like and recognize them within myself, right? So, but we're so easy and so willing to acknowledge that we can relate to the negative things that we think about people, but the positive things we assume that we can't resonate with. So when we understand that, and we understand that our perception of the world is specifically designed based upon what we're projecting into it, all of a sudden interactions with people become really, really fun. And you learn to understand that, you know, the things that people say to you, they're not about you at all, ever. The good or the bad, right? It's so egotistical for us to think that when somebody says something about us, they're actually talking about us, because what they're really talking about is themselves.
Yeah, and it's an interesting way to view it, and I don't know that a lot of people think in those terms. You had your breakdown in 2016.
16, yep.
How long have you been a lawyer?
I started practicing in 2012.
So in those 4 years, first off, what made you want to go into criminal defense? And kudos to you for going through law school to get there. That's fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you. I honestly don't know why I'm so good at criminal defense and why I enjoy it so much, because I was adamant I would never do it. I mean, my dad went to work one day and never came home. And the idea, although it was an accident, it was a preventable one.
Was he a lawyer?
And what's that?
What was your job, your dad's job?
He was in road construction.
Okay.
And so the idea, I know what it feels like to have a family member that you are able to talk to one day and you never get to say goodbye to, and the next day they're gone. And so when I first went to law school, I thought there is no way in hell that I could possibly defend anybody who makes someone else feel the way that I felt about my dad. I knew that I wanted to do criminal law, but I could never imagine doing defense. But then we would do all these mock trials, and I would enter in these competitions, and I would lose all the ones that I was a prosecutor, and I would win all the ones that I was on the defense side. And eventually, like, I don't know if it's because I feel like they're the underdog that don't get the representation that they should. I don't know if it's protecting their rights the way that my dad's rights were never protected. I don't know. But I was just drawn to it. And there was no other area of law that I had even considered. The idea of practicing personal injury or drawing up corporate contracts, like, makes me want to like poke my eyes out.
Is it possible that you subconsciously wanted to defend the little girl who lost everybody?
Yeah, it very well could be. Never thought of it that way before, but it very well could be.
So how did your practice change from 2012 after your breakdown in 2016?
Yeah. So in 2012, I moved to Vegas thinking that I was going to work at the public defender's office. I wanted specifically, I look back now at this goal and I'm so glad I didn't get it. I specifically wanted to work for low-income people charged with capital crimes. So that would have meant that my entire life would have been spent with your murderers, your sexual assaults with some sort of violence attached to them. And for me, I wanted to make sure that the people who had the most on the line had representation that they could be proud of in a system that doesn't always provide that. Vegas had an amazing public defender's office. I moved here, I interned at the public defender's office, and I expected to get hired. And I think that expected to get hired is the part that we get to focus on, because the only way that you're ever disappointed in life is when you have expectations, right? So I didn't get the job. And for whatever reason that was, we were, it was Vegas in 2012. They were just catching up from the 2008 recession. People were, the county didn't have the money to hire the people they thought they were going to have. All of these factors played into it. But the reality is, I had to look at a different path for myself because I didn't get this job that I thought I was going to get. So I started looking at all other opportunities, and I got hired at an immigration firm, and I went in to the interview because I needed to pay my bills, and I got the job. On my first interview, I sat in my car and I cried because I didn't want to do immigration work. And for the first probably 12 months, it was evident that I didn't want to do immigration work. I was 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I represented my clients to the best of my ability and I did it well, but I constantly had my eye on getting back into the public defender's office. I kept applying for the PD's office and I did eventually get another interview opportunity. And then, as it always does, the universe presented me with choices to question how bad I really wanted the goal I said I wanted. So for anybody who's not familiar with the legal system, we have, especially on the immigration side of things, it's federal. So you have your administration side of the immigration courts, the Board of Immigration Appeals. But then if you appeal those decisions, it goes to the Ninth Circuit or whatever circuit you're in. We're in the Ninth in Vegas. So it goes to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. That court is directly underneath the United States Supreme Court. And for many people, that is the place that their case ends. So I got notified that at the same time that I was going to have, my interview for this job that I had been saying I wanted for the last 5 years, all through law school, and then the 2 years that I'd been waiting for it. I got notified that my boss was going to send me to San Francisco to argue in front of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Oh, wow.
And there are attorneys that wait their entire careers for opportunities like this. And I also knew that the public defender's office here is so competitive that if I went to this interview and I got the job and then I turned it down to do this Ninth Circuit representation, that I probably would never get another job offer from them again. And so I made the very difficult choice to withdraw my application for the public defender's office, and I never applied again.
Wow.
I did 2 arguments in front of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals over the next 2 years, had some amazing experiences that I never would have had otherwise. And then I went and worked for a criminal defense firm that was a private firm. And I was so excited to leave immigration behind. And I worked for them for 2 days before the partners were in my office telling me that they loved my immigration experience and wanted me to start an immigration firm for them. And when they asked me if this is something I wanted to do, I was like, it's really not. And they were like, well, this is the salary package we're thinking of. And I'm like, well, that's a different story, right? I'm on board with this.
Yeah.
So at this point, I'd been practicing for 2.5 years. And I started a firm for them, grew it. It became wildly successful. And in 2016, I had my meltdown. It ironically coincided with my first 6-figure year, which is the experience that was supposed to take away all the hurt and trauma that I had experienced in my entire life. And over the next year, as I started to heal, I started to question whether I even wanted to practice law at all anymore. I was super close to just letting my bar license lapse, going back to bartending, hitting the reset button and figuring out where I went wrong in life. And somebody suggested that I open my own law firm. And I thought, that's a horrific idea. Like, I just told you I don't want to do this anymore. And you are telling me that I should take on more responsibility and actually put my name on the door. And it was the best decision I ever made.
Wow.
It was 2017 when I opened my law firm, October 1st. Actually, October 2nd was my first day in business. So we're going on almost 6 years.
And so did it take a lot of convincing? Because you're at a 6-figure level. Here's the thing about chasing external things. I'll be happy when, I'll be happy if, I'll be
Yes.
happy. You get there and you're like, damn, is that all there is? I always picture like the old time pioneers coming across the United States.
Yeah.
They get to that next hill and go, that's our final destination. And then they see this vast, like, emptiness still before them. And it's like, oh crap, another mountain, right? But if we're always just chasing that external and never working on the internal, we get there and they're like, well, that's not much of a big deal. I still feel empty.
Yeah. And that's what caused the breakdown, right? Because all of these things that I didn't want to deal with, all of the loss in my family, money, mindset issues, failed relationships. I had been married, I had been divorced, I had been, all of these things that bring us guilt and shame and hurt. They just went in this box that, like, my fairy godmother was supposed to take away when I had a 6-figure income, right? And you're 100% accurate. And this is, so much of what I talk about when I speak is that the worst thing that you can do and the most dangerous thing you can do is tie your version of happiness and success to an external result. Because when you hit it, the understanding of how the world operates shatters and you don't know how to function. So you end up in one of two spots. You either chase it forever, never reaching it and never feeling fulfilled, or you reach it, your world breaks apart because nothing changes. And then you have to figure out how to pick up the pieces and what life looks like, because your entire life you were operating under the assumption that things were going to change at a certain point. At this point, my overlying word for my life is intentionality, understanding the purpose for everything that it is that I want to do, and understanding that goals change and desires change and definitions of success change. When I work with my coaching clients, I have them define success for themselves every 3 months when we do quarterly planning. Like, as we expand our perception, as we accomplish things, and then we process through our filters what that means for us and for the people around us, our definition of what it is that we want and what we're willing to give up in order to accomplish it changes.
And if you're doing it right, if you're doing the internal, it should become less external for what those
things are.
Yeah.
I mean, think of, we've always known it as midlife crises, right? Because we've all known the person that sold everything that they own, bought like the red sports car, or now it's the van, right? And they live in the van. And for some people, it really is a midlife crisis. They don't want to do the internal work. They don't want to deal with it. So they're running away. For others, though, they've done the internal work and they've realized that the rest of it doesn't matter. And the van is really all that they ever needed.
Yeah, right? It's the peace and tranquility, because, and I'm 58, so I'm not having a midlife crisis, but I understand the desire for the van, because the simplicity of just sitting by a beach and listening to the ocean is so much more appealing than acquiring this or acquiring that, or the hustle bustle, so I get all that. How did your breakdown manifest itself? What did it look like?
Oh, this is always fun. So my breakdown manifested itself because I had become a manipulative, horrible person that, and I use that term lovingly, right? Because I was not a bad person in any way, shape, or form. My behaviors were bad, but I was so in them that I couldn't even acknowledge it. Like, have you ever met that person that is manipulative, but thinks they're a good person, or thinks that they're not manipulative, and so they manipulate people, but then they act like they're saving them at the same time? That was me.
Yeah. I used to be that guy.
Yeah, what it came down to was I felt so out of control that the only thing that I could do was control people around me, because every time I started to feel like my life was spiraling out of control, I would cause an issue somewhere else that I knew I could solve. And then I would solve that problem, and then I would feel useful again. And normally the easiest place for this to manifest is in your romantic relationships, because nobody else will put up with it, right? So I had just started dating a new guy. We'd been together about 4 months. Our relationship already had been full of red flags. They might as well have just like stolen Post-it notes and covered me in them. And I got sent to Reno for work, 8 hours away. And I was up there and we got in a fight. And you tell me how you manipulate somebody who won't answer their phone. And for a week, it was 4 days. I was up there for a week, but for 4 days, we weren't talking. And it was the first time that there was nobody around me to distract me. And I was stuck to deal with the panic and the anxiety myself. And I couldn't do it. I wasn't capable.
Mhm.
And this is the super dangerous part of this breakdown, is I was up there for a purpose, which was court. So I was a total mess. But the moment I had to be there for somebody else, the face went on,
Yep.
it all went away. I became what somebody else needed me to be,
Mhm.
went in and did my job. But as soon as nobody was relying on me and I didn't have to put on a face, I couldn't function.
Mhm.
It's really interesting because there's a little bear that sits at my house. I'm actually getting ready to bring him to my office. I went to undergrad at Idaho State. And this weekend, it was March of 2016. It was March Madness. Well, Idaho State has never made the March Madness tournament ever in their existence. But there's the satellite tournaments for all the schools that don't make it, right? And it
Right.
just happened that that was in Reno, and it was the weekend that I was there. So about 2 days into this breakdown, I have college friends that I haven't talked to for years that are coming into town. So we're having drinks and I've got some distractions. And we go to an Idaho State game, and I had 0 Idaho State memorabilia. So I got this little bear decked out in Idaho State gear, and I brought him home. Well, that trip also corresponds with the first time that I decided I needed to talk to a therapist. And so that bear sits on my bookshelf at home. And to most people, it looks supportive of my alma mater. For me, it is a reminder of the moment that I chose to take back my life and to seek the help that I needed so badly.
I can relate to everything but the bear, because I was in my mid-30s when I had similar things. Like, I would literally hyperventilate if there weren't people around. But as soon as people were around, perfectly calm, ready to go. And you're right, you manipulate the situation so that you feel like you're needed and wanted. And then, you become so good at it, they don't even know you're manipulating them.
And you don't even know, right? Like, you have no
No.
idea what's going on. Like, this guy that I was dating is my best friend now. We dated until 2017. So I guess my timeline was wrong. We'd been together for about a little over a year at the time. And he is absolutely my best friend now. But he is the only person that I ever dated who was willing to look at me and say, whatever behaviors are about to happen right now, I love you anyways, and they are not going to impact or change my behavior. I'm still going to do this thing that you seem to be upset about, and I still love you. And whatever you need to do, you go do it. And some people may hear that and say, how incredibly horrible. But everybody else in my life had changed and coddled me. And, when they're out with their friends, and then I call them 27 times and they come home, like, it's just like a kid. It's just like if you've ever trained a dog, they get what they want once and they learn that that behavior works.
Mhm.
That was the way all my relationships were. And I didn't realize it was a problem.
Well, I hear it and I think, wow, what a loving gift to say, I recognize what's going on in you. I love you anyway. It's not going to affect this. So grow and learn, or don't.
Yeah.
Right.
And when I started going to therapy, we tried to date for a couple more months. And it was about May. And what was so crazy is when I went to therapy, I really still wasn't going to therapy for me. I was going to therapy to save this relationship. Because as soon as I got back into town and we started talking again, I didn't need therapy anymore. I was fine. Right.
Mhm.
And so he convinced me to go to the appointment. And for probably the first month of therapy, I was convinced I was there to save my relationship. And it was about 6 weeks in that I acknowledged for the first time that he was never going to give me what I wanted in a partner. He was never going to be that person. He was an amazing person, but what I wanted was completely different. And I'll never forget the day that I asked him, we We had met up at his house, and I said, I know this isn't your thing, but can we just separate for like 2 hours, and will you write down everything that you want in a relationship? And I'm going to do the same. And then can we come back and talk? And we did separate for 2 hours. I called him, and I said, can I come back over? And he says, you can, but I don't want to do this anymore. And I said, neither do I. And I picked up a 6-pack of beer, and I went to his house, and we drank the beer, and we both cried, and we mourned the relationship. And we have been friends ever since. It is 7 years, and there's never been a moment, I guess 2017, so 6 years. And it has never been a moment that our friendship has ever been in question.
That's beautiful. How's your love life or relationship now with anybody?
It took a lot for me to enter back into the dating scene. So I just started recently dating again. I felt like I really needed to heal alone first. I had never really been alone. I got married really young. So I met my ex-husband. I was a daddy's girl growing up. My mom and I did not have a good relationship. It was bad. And I met my ex-husband in June of 2001. He met my dad in July of 2001, and my dad died in August of 2001. Mm-hmm. And so I was committed to making that relationship work, because I couldn't imagine being in a relationship with somebody where I would talk about my dad and they would have no frame of reference of who I was talking about. So we got married. And then when I started to realize that that wasn't what I wanted and started to heal a little bit, I ended up separating from him, but I jumped from bad relationship to bad relationship after that. And I really just needed to spend some time alone. So I've been single since 2017.
Yeah. Again, it's that external chase, though. You're still chasing externally to fulfill something.
Yeah, it's just a different thing, right? It's a different shiny ball. So I finally feel like where I'm at right now, I'm ready to welcome somebody into the life that I'm building.
So from criminal law and immigration law to podcaster, what's the name of your podcast?
So it is now called Break Your Bullshit Box. It was formerly known as More Than Corporate.
Okay. And what is your podcast? What's the format? The
format's very similar to this. It's very conversational. When I first started the podcast, I did an interview episode every Monday and a solo episode every Friday. And I'm probably going to go back to that format pretty soon. It's all about, very similar to this. It's the bullshit we tell ourselves, right? I truly believe that we have these two different boxes in our minds that we fill up. One is our compartmentalization box. All of our trauma, all of our guilt, all of our shame, all of the bad decisions we feel like we've made in our life, it goes in there and we seal it and we expect something to take it away. And then you have this bullshit box where all of the excuses that we have that we justify staying where we're at, we put those in that bullshit box and we keep it ready and open and available for us to grab those excuses whenever we need it. And those two boxes really need to be flipped. We need to be willing to open that compartmentalization box often and understanding that it doesn't define our identity. And we need to close that bullshit box and we need to seal it off, and the things that go in it are inaccessible again. And so that's really what the podcast is all about, is filling this bullshit box and being willing to break it and destroy your excuses. I have a subscription box that will be starting soon that is a physical product. It's a box that doesn't open, called a bullshit box, and it has bullshit slips, and it gets sent out, and they can take all of their excuses, write them down on the bullshit slips, put them in the bullshit box. They can't physically open it again. Every 90 days, we break the bullshit box, we burn the slips, and they start over with a new one.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that concept. And you said you're finished a book?
I did. So book is the same name. It's called Break Your Bullshit Box. Excuses aren't tolerated and results are earned.
Nice. And when will that be coming out?
Likely August, September-ish.
So right around the time this is airing.
Yeah,
So
my dad passed away August 23rd. This year is going to be his 21 year. And I would really love to release it on August 23rd and redefine that day for myself. I'm not quite sure I'm going to meet that deadline, so it may be a little bit after that, but that's the goal, is August 23rd.
That's awesome. And I love the flipping the script. So again, it's a form of healing. My dad passed away 4 years ago this May. We're taping this in May. And every year on his passing, and then on his birthday, and then on Father's Day, I always go, I don't drink coffee, but my wife and I go to the little cafe. We order a cup of coffee and we have a piece of pie, because that's
Oh,
always something he did, was pie and coffee. So we've turned each one of those days into our version of what you're trying to do. And I think it's
yeah.
beautiful when you can take and make that more healing and less trauma.
Yeah, 100%. And it just takes time, right? Like, for so long, I couldn't even form memories of my dad. And going through NLP and going through the healing and everything that I've done in the last 5 years has allowed me to be, and I know this is going to sound really woo-woo. So for all of you that are listening, as an attorney, like, I have always been the most evidence-based person on the planet. And so when I started going down this process and we were talking about some of the healing things that we do, I was like, you are out of your damn mind. I am not doing that. And then I did, right? And so now it's to the point where, especially when I fly, because I spent so much time in airplanes with my dad, especially when I fly, I just have conversations with him. Like, he's there. I feel his presence
Yep.
more than,
Yep.
and sometimes when I can like sit in the back of the plane and see the wing, it's almost like he's just sitting on the wing of the plane, just like having a chat with me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and I know that
That's all
he's
based
always
in
there.
science. As an evidence-based person, that is based in science of your brain and the way our brains work and
Yeah,
operate.
100%.
There's no
100%. I mean,
woo in it. It's science.
yeah, 9 times out of 10, the conversations we're having with other people are just the conversations we need to have with ourselves anyways. So even if that person's not there, yeah, I remember when I first did this work and I was first introduced to it. And I asked, as part of this exercise we were doing, I asked somebody what the first time they experienced anger was. And they told me it was like 7 lifetimes ago and they were on a pirate ship, and I called bullshit. And I remember going to my coach and trainer and mentor, and I said, there's no evidence for this. Like, this isn't real. And she says, does it matter? And I said, yes, I'm an attorney. It matters. It matters if it's real. And she says, if she thinks it's real, it's dictating everything that she does in her life. So whether you think it's real or not doesn't fucking matter.
Right. It's the perception in her. Here's the thing about our brain. And again, with a degree in psychology, I throw some of this crap out there. Your brain does not know the difference between fantasy and reality.
All
So
day.
whatever you're telling it, it's creating. And our job as a brain, our brain's job is to manifest whatever you're thinking about at that moment, good or bad.
Yep.
Doesn't matter. Fantasy or not, doesn't matter. It's your brain's job to make that your reality. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
if you go to buy a new car, like oh, I want a purple whatever. You've never seen a purple whatever until you've decided that now that's important to you, and now you go outside and suddenly they're
They're
everywhere.
everywhere. Yeah.
Well, your brain determined that information was important to you, so it allowed you to see it, because we're bombarded so much throughout the day that it has to filter out, and it
Yeah.
decides, okay, this isn't important to Amber, this isn't. And once you decide that it's important to you, now you start seeing it and it becomes in your consciousness. So yeah, I can see.
Yeah. I love this conversation because I have clients all the time that tell me, see, I told you that this was going to happen. And I'm like, did it happen because it was going to happen anyways and you had this premonition, or did it happen because you focused on it for so long that your behaviors and your actions caused it to happen, right?
Yeah,
You know,
where your energy flows, it goes, right?
yeah, we talk about this often. It's actually one of the chapters in my book, and it's this idea of being at cause for everything in your life rather than being an effect of the forces that are in your life. And you know, I talk about this in my book, and this was probably one of the most painful things to write. Um, my dad didn't, he wasn't responsible for his death. He didn't like jump out in front of a car. Like there, it was an accident, but there were decisions that he made that led to him being on the road that day. Decisions that we would talk about often, about how he didn't feel safe on the road. And he was worried about an accident happening with that company. He was scheduled to get his CDL license and take the test a couple of days after the accident occurred. Because if he was going to be on a job that he felt so unsafe at, he was going to be in a place where he felt like he was safe in the car, in a truck, instead of laying cement behind it, right? Is it my dad's fault that he passed away? No. Are there choices that he made that led to him being in that situation? Absolutely. Were those choices right or wrong? Only he can decide if they were right and wrong. We are where we are, right? The same thing for me. When my dad passed away, I went into a dark hole. It took me 9 years to graduate with a 4-year degree. I had alcohol abuse issues for a lot of those years. I got married and divorced and in and out of bad relationships. And I can blame that all on shitty experiences and bad cards. And, you know, I lost my dad. And what do you expect from me? Or I can acknowledge that I made choices and those choices had consequences. And the moment that we're willing to look at even the things that are out of our control, the moment that we're willing to look at what choices we made that put us in the out of control situation, that's where our brain learns what it can do differently to prevent out of control situations again, right? It's why I despise the phrase, "it is what it is." I get it. So many people want to focus on the fact that there are things that you can control and there's things that you can't, and you have to focus on what you can't control. But for 95% of the people who use that phrase, it's a cop out to dealing with the shit in their life.
Yeah. I always say that you can't choose the cards that are dealt you, but you get to choose how you play them. And I always tell, like, even my children and stuff, every action you take has consequences. Some are good, some are bad, but every choice is going to bring something to your life. So, you know, we co-create. There's a reason I have co-create as part of my business. We co-create our life, either intentionally or not intentionally.
Yes.
And too many people just walk through life and then they say, oh, well, my fate or my destiny. No, your thoughts and your efforts and your work and your focus, you co-create the life you're living, good or bad. And if you don't like it, change it.
Change it.
But we do have, you know, we do have a domino butterfly effect. Choices we make put us in certain places, like you said, and certain things do or don't happen.
It's so much easier to blame the universe, though.
Yeah.
I mean, and I get it, right? This is a difficult conversation because anybody who's lost a child or a spouse or a parent, like, you don't want to, anybody who's been the victim of a horrific crime, you don't want to think that there were things, like, we never want to victim blame, right? And that's not what we're doing here. But even people who have been the victim of horrific crimes can tell you that there were multiple times up to that point where they had a decision, they ignored a thing in their gut, they had that feeling that something was off and they pushed it aside. Like, we ignored things that put us in a situation to be that. And that doesn't mean that that's their fault, but it does mean that if they're not willing to acknowledge that they had control over certain parts of it, then they're going to be a victim to that event for the rest of their life.
Yeah, and I love that because we we don't always get a choice as to what happens to us from an external force. And if we play the victim card over and over and over again, our life becomes nothing but victimization. And I've said this on 20 podcasts now. Our job is to take your scab and make it a scar, because as long as it's a scab, you can still pick at it, it still hurts and it still bleeds. But once it's a scar, it's just the tapestry
Done.
of your life. And you
Yeah.
have to heal to make it the tapestry of your life. Stop being the victim to whatever happened and make it your tapestry.
Yeah,
That's
I
why I
mean,
did
and
this
what's so
podcast.
interesting about this is I had mentioned that my mom and I didn't have a very good relationship. And I mean, we have a great relationship now.
I was just going to ask you if that's improved.
We have a great relationship now. And I talk about this in the book as well, which my mom's got to read it before it comes out because it is rough. She wasn't perfect, neither was I. I was an asshole as a kid. We just butted heads, right? But the reality is I was a victim for so long in my life, and every victim needs a villain. And my mom
Mhm,
was my villain, right?
mhm,
There was nothing that she was going to be able to do or say that was going to make me believe that she was on my side.
mhm,
Nothing, because I needed her to be the villain in my life so that I could be the victim of it.
mhm.
And so when we talk about being a victim of these experiences, and this is also why there's so many people out there who talk about this underdog approach and tell me I can't do it and all of these things, and I get that, but at the same time that push needs a pushback, right?
Mhm.
And the higher you rise up the success ladder, the less you have people telling you that you can't do it anymore. So
Yep.
if your success has always come because your mom told you that you couldn't do it and you wanted to prove her wrong, or some guy on the internet told you that you couldn't write a book, so you wrote a book, right? Whatever it is, when you get in the circles that you and I play in, you don't have that person telling you that you can't do it. Your life is full of supportive people. And if that's your motivation, you're going to peak until you start to realize that you were the person that was driving the boat all along.
Well, that's why it's important to surround yourself with not yes people, but people who are going to be truthful and honest, like your best friend. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you this interesting story that correlates exactly with what you're talking about. Are you old enough to remember the biodome?
The movie?
No, that would tell me no. Um, in the, I think it was the 80s or 90s, somewhere in there, in Arizona, they built this biodome, self-contained atmospheric thing where they had people live so that they could control the environment. They wanted to see
Interesting.
how a controlled environment would operate. Well, in the biodome, they found that the trees would only grow to a certain height and then they would topple over.
Yeah.
So when they created this perfect atmosphere for humanity to thrive in, I think they were trying to study if they could do shit on Mars, but
Yeah.
that's beside the point. But what they forgot to do was add wind. So
Mm,
wind is the resistance that makes a tree's roots grow deeper. And so they had no resistance. So they only could grow to a certain height and then they would fall over
yeah.
because they hadn't had the resistance to make their roots grow deeper.
Yeah.
And that's how some of our life is. We think, well, if we don't have any more resistance, things are going to be great. No, your shit's going to fall over.
Yeah.
He's got no
It is.
resistance.
And the other thing too, and this is probably my absolute favorite analogy because I used to be a fixer, right?
Mhm.
I knew that I had knowledge and tools and resources and experiences that could make other people's lives better. And damn it, they were going to take them whether they wanted them or not, right?
Yes.
And I remember hearing this metaphor and I thought it was bullshit. So I researched it and it is not. So the metaphor goes that a grandfather and a grandson are walking through the woods And as they're walking through the woods, they see this cocoon that is wrestling and struggling. And the grandson wants to see this beautiful butterfly that's going to come out of this.
Yep.
And he takes a stick that's sharp and he starts to break this cocoon, and the grandfather tries to stop him. And what comes out is just this mush, right? And what science has proven is that when a caterpillar transforms to a butterfly, when they wrap themselves up in that cocoon, first of all, they liquefy, and then they rebuild themselves up. And when they start struggling, it's that struggle that builds the blood vessels to their wings that allows them to fly. So if you help them out of that cocoon, they either, depending on when you do it, they're either just non-existent, or they can't fly and they can't take care of themselves and they can't become what they were supposed to become because they don't have the support system in their wings, right? So how many people do we know that enable somebody because they can't handle the discomfort?
Mm-hmm.
You know, when my dad passed away, I didn't understand this at the time. And when my dad passed away, if one more person reached out to me and told me they were sorry for my loss, I was going to throw them under a truck.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's a really bad analogy. I'm sorry I said that.
No.
But like, you get it.
Yeah.
I was not okay with it. I didn't need you to be sorry. Like,
Right.
it sucked, right? And I remember for years and years and years, whenever somebody would pass away and I would be reaching out to somebody, I would always say the same thing: I'm sorry for your loss. And it's because it felt obligatory. I didn't know what else to say.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually I realized that there's nothing that you can say, right? I'm sorry for your loss isn't said for the other person, it's said for us.
Mm-hmm.
So that we feel like we've done something that shows that we're trying, right?
Yeah.
What really needs to be said is, I know that there's nothing that I can say to make this better. And if you just need somebody to sit with you, I'm here.
Yeah. And that's, two things. First off, I was smiling like a fool as you were telling the butterfly thing, because I use that metaphor and analogy all the time because it is true. And when people want to transform, they forget that you have to liquefy your past and who you were to
And
create
it sucks.
Yeah, and you got to become a whole new species, not just a transformation. You got to something else. So because I use that all the time is why I was smiling. But
I love it.
in your in what you were just saying, people want, because our ego is so big, we want others to know we care. And because we know there's nothing else we can say, that's our automatic go-to.
Yes.
But like what you said, if we take our ego out of it and just be for that person, first off, it acknowledges their sadness and their loss by just letting them sit in it, which they sometimes just need, right?
Yeah.
Permission to just be
They
instead
need
of
permission to not be okay.
right.
Right. They've been putting on this face and they're not going to be okay. I was just looking for a quote that I thought I had saved on my phone and I don't. I would have to track it down. But it was this amazing Facebook post that has been circulating around for the last few years. And it's along the lines that, like, personal development isn't the book, right? It's not the podcast. It's not the exercises that we do in a manual. It's the pain and the tears and the uncertainty and the discomfort and all of the things that we get through doing the work and coming out on the other side. Like, nobody loves personal development. I freaking hate personal development.
Well,
but I love the results of it.
Yeah. And I've said this numerous times, like, okay, there's a difference between positivity and toxic positivity. And
yes, thank you.
The toxic positivity, and anyone who's listened to me has heard this a million times. Everything's sunshine and rainbows and unicorns farting, fairy dust. But positivity is in your darkness, still finding hope. There's a huge difference. And, when we're in our tragedy or in our pain or in our thing, whatever crap is being on to us, we're not sitting there going, oh, thanks God for all the shit. Right.
Yeah. It's true.
But we're eventually going to find that in that pain is where our growth occurred, and then we can move forward. But we have to sit in that. And there's a psychology joke that talks about, and the punchline basically is, when there's that much crap, there's got to be a pony somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So I always say, time to look for your pony, right? You're in this crap, that's great. We're going to look for your pony, but that's not positive toxicity. That's finding hope in the midst of whatever you're going through.
Yeah.
There's such a huge difference, and that allows somebody to sit where they are for a minute. And I tell my wife this all the time: it's okay to stop. You just can't camp.
Yeah.
Stay there for whatever that time frame looks for you, but you're not camping there. Okay.
Yeah. I have a water bottle that says nobody died from falling in the water, or nobody drowned from falling in the water. They drowned from staying there.
Right. Perfect.
Right.
Right.
So I need to get this remade. I had it at my old office. I haven't recreated it at my new office, but when you go into a doctor's office and they have the, like, where's your pain scale?
Yeah.
Right. I had my version of that. It was laminated. It had magnets with it. Do you remember the comic strip that came out probably 5 or 6 years ago? And it's the guy, I think it's a bear, might be a bear, or some dog, might be a dog. But he's engulfed in flames, and each corner of it, there's like 6 quadrants. The flames get higher and higher, and his response gets more and more positive.
Well,
so to the point where it's like, this is okay. And there's like, he's drinking his coffee, and it's a little bit, and then he's like, this is fine. I'm okay with the events that are currently unfolding around me. And then he's just engulfed in flames, and he's like, it's fine. Everything is going to be okay. And so I have like the where is your day today in my law firm, where my staff can like move their as a joke. But using that example, like, toxic positivity is sitting there in those flames going, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, as everything is burning around you.
right.
Instead of knowing that, like, there's a fire extinguisher somewhere, or there's a door that you can walk out of. Right.
Right.
And I think what people confuse is positivity and gratitude, because there is no gratitude in toxic positivity. It's not possible. You're too focused on not acknowledging that anything could go wrong. And gratitude comes from being thankful for what you have, because you might not always have it. And so the only way out of those situations through positivity is being grateful for the experience that taught you the lessons that you now get to learn from, to get back to a place where you are truly fulfilled and happy and positive.
Well, and here's the difference between that too. And I think gratitude and love are our highest vibrations, which move us out of everything. But if you're grateful only when your buffet is full, that's not gratitude. That's just appreciation that you got a nice meal. Gratitude is before you have the meal, knowing that the meal is going to come.
Yeah.
And there's a huge difference. And again, that's the positivity and the toxic positivity, right? You have to be grateful even when you don't have something that you should
be grateful for.
Right.
Right. Like
that's true gratitude.
Always have things to be grateful for.
Yes.
Always. Unless we don't, and that means our heart's not beating. Right. And I know that sounds cliche, but it's true. Like, if you can't open your eyes and find something that you're grateful for the moment that you wake up in the morning, then you're not looking hard enough.
Yeah, and you'll be amazed, not you, but person, whoever's listening to this, you'll be amazed at how fast you move out of your crap when you start finding gratitude just in the little things around you. Like when I was having horrible days or pity parties or whatever, my wife would say, go outside and tell me 5 things you can see, smell, touch, and are grateful for.
I love that.
And once I start doing that, I couldn't even get to 3 without my mood changing and not being like, by the time I got to 5, I was back to like, okay, things are going to move out. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting that you say that, because when I was really suffering from panic attacks and anxiety attacks, like 6, 7, 8, 9 times a day when I first
Mhm.
started therapy. I remember telling my friend, like, there might be times, and I had told everybody this, there might be times that I just get up and walk away from you. It has nothing to do with you and everything to do with the fact that something's happening inside and I need to remove myself from a situation and calm down. And this was the difference for me between therapy and the healing that I did through NLP. And they're both necessary. Um, Therapy taught me coping mechanisms to deal with a panic attack I was in. And NLP helped me understand why they were happening in the first place so I could deal with the root cause of those and not
Mhm.
experience them anymore.
Mhm.
But I walked so freaking much when I was first getting through this initial parts of this therapeutic process. I would be, and some of it, like we'd be playing a card game and we couldn't make it through more than 2 hands. And I would get up and I would have to go for a walk. And then I would come back and I would sit down, and 30 seconds later, I'd have to get up and leave again. And everybody around me needed to be okay with that, because the only way I could combat the anxiety that was coming on and the panic that was coming on was to remove myself from the situation that was causing it and focus on something else. And when I would go for a walk, it was impossible for me to feel panic and anxiety.
Mhm.
And then I would come back, and there was no telling. And this is why these conversations are so important, because what do most people say when you're panicking? It's
Calm
just
down.
take a deep breath,
Yeah, calm
calm
down.
down, take
Yeah.
a deep breath. And my response is like, have you ever had that anxiety attack where you have to tell yourself to breathe?
Mhm.
Like, I'm trying to breathe, that's the problem. I
Right.
can't, which is why I'm panicky, and you telling me to just breathe isn't helping.
Yeah. Our brain starts to cycle in this never-ending loop, and until we break that cycle, we stay there. Amber, this has been a wonderful conversation with you tonight. What is next for you, and what's on your horizon?
Oh my gosh, the book, obviously, I'm so excited for it to come out. And it has been a 2-year process in getting it written, of which only about 6 weeks has been actual writing, maybe less than that. The rest of it has been dealing with all the bullshit that comes up before you start writing. I'm so incredibly proud of this project. I'm so proud of it.
Yeah,
So,
it's going to be amazing. We're going to drop some links on how people can get a hold of you or listen to your podcast or eventually get the book, pre-sales, launch, whatever. So we'll drop all that so that people can reach out. What if you were to give advice, one piece of advice to somebody who's going through what you've gone through, what would you tell them?
um, man, there's so many things depending on the stage that they're in. I think the most important is that nobody knows what the hell they're doing. We're all just figuring it out as we go. So when you look at that person that you think has their life more together than you do, it's an illusion. None of us really do. We just handle it better. Um, the other is definitely that, if so, when I was sitting in this therapeutic spot, what pulled me out of that so much was Brene Brown and her conversations about the arena. So if you're not familiar with those, go check out her TED Talks. They're fantastic. But she has a quote, that if you're not also in the arena getting your ass kicked, I'm not interested in your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, Tommy Lauren also said it in a way which is crazy, because I don't respect anything she says, but I love this. That said, I have to respect you in order to respect your opinion of me.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody that has an opinion of you deserves a response.
Right. Yeah, you don't have to battle everything that is presented to you.
So I think those are the two things. We're all figuring it out together, and not everybody that has an opinion of you deserves a response.
So because you're in my tribe and in my world, this is called a warrior spirit for a reason. And as I told you before we went on the air, I brought this to life to give people the opportunity to share their mess, to make it their message, to make it a survival guide for somebody else. And I asked this question to all my guests: what does having a warrior spirit mean to Amber?
Oh, having a warrior spirit to Amber means being able to support yourself when you need to, being willing to bring other people along while you grow, and having the courage to sit around the campfire, cry, and admit you're not okay.
I love that. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think we could do 2 more hours.
Oh, no doubt. Both of
you're-
us. You are amazing.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate your time and you coming on and sharing, this part of your story. We might have to make it another part 2 down the road.
I would love that. And as soon as we start getting the rebrand done, which by the time this comes out, you guys will probably be listening to the new podcast. But as soon as we get the rebrand done, I would love to have the other side of this conversation.
Oh, I'd be honored. So I appreciate your time tonight. You have a blessed night, and all my heart and gratitude to you.
Thank you.
All righty. Good night.